Hey folks, I'm JC from One Shot Adventures, and today I'm going to give you an overview of the brand new thrilling pulp adventure, The Phantom Jungle. If you've seen some of my earlier videos, you'll know that I'm a huge fan of the pulp cliffhanging genre. It's one of my favorite adventures for one-shot RPGs because they typically feature exotic locations, fast action, lots of drama, and great villains. All the things players love. This month, I released The Phantom Jungle on my website. It's free, and there's versions available for GURPS and Call of Cthulhu. But it'll work with any RPG of your choice that does really well with action games. As always, the adventure includes pre-generated characters, maps, VTT assets, and even some custom audio, so it should be easy for a GM to prepare. Set in the 1930s, The Phantom Jungle sends the heroes into the jungles of Peru, where they'll have to contend with wilderness survival, revolutionaries, a jetpacking mercenary, and an old ironclad chock full of a cult of megalomaniacs who want to carve out a new nation in South America. That's a lot. But before we dive in, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you punch that like and subscribe button like they're villainous Nazis. And remember, there are spoilers coming up ahead. So if you're thinking about playing The Phantom Jungle, just turn right around and back off slowly. One of my favorite techniques in pulp adventures is starting the adventure at the end of an adventure the players didn't actually play. The Indiana Jones movies do this all the time. Just think about Indy negotiating with Lao Che at the beginning of Temple of Doom. That was the end of a story that you didn't see. I think this kind of setup is a really fun gimmick, so The Phantom Jungle starts in the same way. After a travel mishap, the PCs are on a boat. They're sailing up the Javari River, rushing to the aid of one of their fathers, who's in Brazil, hundreds of miles away. It's midnight, the PCs have been drinking, and the captain stands up to make a toast. Let's see how that goes.
I am sorry, my friends, but this shall be our last toast of the evening, and, unfortunately, the end of our voyage together. You see, when you arrived on my boat, I did not know you carried with you the legendary jewels of Nazca. But I'm not a thief. Besides, what would a humble river captain do with such a treasure? The jewels would bring me nothing but bad luck, like they have brought you tonight. So I am not a thief, but the twins, those horrible criminal brothers, want the jewels of Nazca very badly. And you have made an enemy of them. They told me if I betrayed you tonight, they would pay me well. How could I say no? I am truly sorry, but the twins are here, and our adventure is now over.
And with that, the PCs realize they've been betrayed by their captain, and these criminal twins and their thugs board the boat. They're determined to steal back the jewels of Nazca. Now there's a fun twist here because the PCs actually have no clue what the twins are talking about. To their knowledge, they don't have the jewels. They do, but this will turn into a huge misunderstanding. The twins will get more irritated and bloodthirsty. Inevitably, this will turn into a big brawl on the boat, with the drunk PCs, goons throwing dynamite, and piranha in the water. However this opening encounter works out, the PC's boat is damaged beyond repair, and now they're stranded in the middle of the jungle. The PCs can find a trail in the jungle and make their way towards a leper colony. Back in the 1930s, the Jesuits set up small colonies in the Amazon to take care of lepers, and now the PCs are heading towards one. They're probably hoping that they can find their way back to civilization from there. When the PCs arrive at the leper colony, they'll discover the place is in terrible shape. The camp's beloved doctor, Dr. Nalini Joshi, who had somehow formulated a cure for leprosy, has been kidnapped. The camp's only remaining nurse, Marco, is overwhelmed and says Dr. Joshi was kidnapped in the middle of the night by these strange gray ghosts, who he suspects being associated with the rebels who are hiding nearby in the jungle. Investigating the scene of the kidnapping doesn't reveal much, other than the doctor seems to have made her cure from the saliva of rare lizards who live at an old ruined temple that nobody really seems to know where it is. And the PCs discover a carved statuette with one amber eye among her belongings, along with a Confederate gold coin, oddly minted a decade after the American Civil War. More on that later. Marco begs the PCs to find the doctor and confront the revolutionaries who live at a camp to the north. He also warns them about El Clavo, an infamous mercenary who's operating in the area, and that El Clavo's deadly traps are everywhere. The PCs will find their way to this rebel camp, and they discover a raucous event going on. The rebels have trapped this ferocious white jaguar and placed it in the middle of a pit in the middle of their camp. The rebels excitedly tell the PCs that they've captured El Clavo, and they're forcing him to walk on a tight balance beam directly above this pit. But it's not El Clavo. It's actually the PC's poor father, Arthur Vanderwoodson, the man that they thought they were hundreds of miles away from rescuing. He's been mistaken for El Clavo by the rebel leader, and now he's moments from tumbling into the jaws of a hungry jaguar. The PCs get to figure out how to save Arthur from this predicament. I had one group carefully negotiate for his release, while another group just jumped headlong into the pit, excited to wrestle with the jaguar. This did win respect from the rebels the hard way. I like it when adventures give tough problems, but don't always present clear-cut solutions. This is definitely one of those problems. Once he's free, Arthur tells the PCs his story. He was on the trail of the Golden Quipu, a legendary Incan artifact that held vast knowledge coded into tens of thousands of knots and strands. He learned about it while corresponding with a man named Kirby Bell B, who was supposed to meet him at this temple so they could unlock it together with the key, that statuette with the amber eyes. However, when Arthur got to the temple, he was attacked. Explosions killed his men, and he heard horrible noises in the jungle, and he ran for his life. He lost the statuette and was captured by these rebels, who mistook him for the dangerous El Clavo. Unfortunately, there's another complication for poor Arthur. He contracted leprosy from his adventures in the jungle, and now he's desperate to get help from the kidnapped Dr. Joshi, and he wants the PCs to save the Golden Quipu before it gets destroyed by whoever it was that attacked him at the temple. But who kidnapped Dr. Joshi? Who attacked Arthur at the temple? Was it those mysterious gray ghosts? Let's rewind for a few minutes. After the Civil War, 3 traitorous Confederate officers decided to flee Reconstruction to South America. Manning an ironclad, the Tuscaloosa, these officers broke through the Union blockade and they escaped into Peru. This actually did happen, by the way. Some ex-Confederates fled the Civil War for South America, but the following absolutely did not happen. The leader of these Confederates was a man named Cornelius B., who was hungry for power and revenge. Cornelius and his men, shortly after they got to Peru, discovered the Temple of Koniraya, unlocked it, and found the eternal Quipu inside. They reached out and touched it, and when they did, the vast knowledge of the cosmos poured into their heads. Maybe it was just ancient knowledge, or maybe it was something more sinister.
Oh, what about the great race of Yith? They're always messing around with our human heads.
Either way, Cornelius and his friends got greedy. They kept touching the Quipu, hungry for the knowledge that it would give them, but they got overwhelmed by all that knowledge, and they fell into a deep coma. Unable to wake them, their comrades sealed them inside the temple, along with lots of Confederate gold, where they still slumber today. Years later, Cornelius's great-grandson, Kirby Bell B., began having dreams about his grandfather, locked away in this temple. He became obsessed with his grandfather, and he was determined to found a new nation of industry in the fragile country of Peru. Kirby Bell B. came up with a plan called Certum Americana. He would reawaken his grandfather, use the gold from the temple to unite all the revolutionary groups in Peru, and then carve out a new nation that he would rule with his grandfather. This crazy idea even received funding from Nazi Germany. However, Kirby had 3 obstacles in his way. One, he needed to get into the temple, and he didn't have that statuette key. So he lured the man who did, Arthur Vanderwoodson, and tried to steal it from him. But he failed, and the only thing he was left with was one of the statuette's amber eyes. 2, he knew that the Confederates, to protect Cornelius B, had trapped the temple with all kinds of crazy death traps. So he hired El Clavo, a notorious mercenary, to deal with those. Finally, he had no idea how to wake up his grandfather once he found him, but he got lucky and discovered the brilliant Dr. Joshi living not too far from the temple. When she refused to help, he ordered his men to kidnap her. So now Kirby is waiting outside the temple, sitting in his grandfather's old ironclad, the Tuscaloosa, and trying desperately to find that key and make his way into the temple. And this is when the PCs arrive. They'll get to the temple and probably be shocked to see a Confederate ironclad guarding the place. Kirby's men are out and about scouting the temple, and he's inside the ironclad with Dr. Joshi. Nobody can get in this temple unless that statuette is made whole again with both of its eyes intact. So this is an open-ended part of the adventure, which plays out like a sandbox. The PCs need to rescue Dr. Joshi, recover the eye from the statuette, and get into the temple to secure the Golden Quipu. Against them is Kirby Bell B and his goons, a Confederate ironclad, and El Clavo, who's somewhere in the area working on a pet project, a nitrogen gas jetpack. When I ran this section for my players, they ran it like a stealth operation. They waited until nightfall, swam out to the ironclad, and then smuggled Dr. Joshi off the boat. Meanwhile, another PC carefully stole the missing amber eye from a sleeping Kirby Bell B. It worked shockingly well, and they avoided fighting altogether. But players can take other approaches too. They can rush in, guns blazing, or they can set up their own careful traps and tricks to capture or kill the enemies here. The Phantom Jungle is almost at its end when the PCs use the intact statuette to get into the temple. The temple isn't huge. There's about 5 rooms inside with Incan and Confederate traps and some light puzzle solving. GMs can easily add or expand the temple here. I can see you Call of Cthulhu players planting a Hound of Tindalos or 2 in the temple, but it also works just fine as an obstacle course.
Oh, but Hounds of Tindalos are just the start, aren't they? You could go with Mi-Go or Night Gaunts, or what about Goldenok? He never gets any love.
Finally, the PCs arrive in the chamber that holds the Eternal Quipu, and also the original 3 Confederate officers who are lying comatose nearby. But there's been a lot of disturbances with this temple. The PCs have probably been setting off traps or firing cannons and who knows what, and suddenly Cornelius B awakens from his coma, and the PCs realize they're in trouble. Cornelius B's encounter with the Eternal Quipu have evolved him into a sort of powerful demigod. He's utterly bonkers, and he only wants to resume his original vengeance on the Union, but this time he's got some powerful psychic abilities to help him do that. The finale of this adventure can play out very differently depending on the chess pieces still left on the board. If the PCs haven't fully dealt with Kirby Bell B and his cult of goons, they'll have to deal with Cornelius and his grandson. And El Clavo here is a wild card. He can probably be convinced to help whichever side pays him more. He's a mercenary after all. But the PC's main challenge is going to be dealing with Cornelius B. Like one of those omniscient villains from Star Trek, the only way they're going to defeat him is with a combination of trickery and firepower. Fortunately, there's many tools around in the area to use against him, including the Tuscaloosa's cannons. Yeah, my players ended up bribing El Clavo, setting up a trap, and blowing away Cornelius with a cannon. Hey Cornelius, you know what happens to a demigod when it's struck by a cannon? The same thing that happens to everything else. And that's the conclusion of The Phantom Jungle. I wanted to take a different approach from my other 2 pulp adventures when I wrote this one. The Lost Jewels of Era and The Uncanny Curse of Sekhmet are both world-spanning adventures that push the PCs from one exotic location to another. This time, I wanted to focus the pulp action in just one setting. If you ever get a chance to play this adventure, let me know how that worked for you. As always, this adventure includes VTT assets for you GMs running games online. Not only are there pre-generated characters, but there's also digital handouts, tokens, battle maps, and for you GURPS GMs, all the characters are in GCS format, so you can easily import them into the VTT tool of your choice, like Foundry. There's also 2 professionally voiced villainous speeches. Let me know in the comments below if you think those are cool or helpful. You heard one earlier on in the video. Well, that's it for the Phantom Jungle. You survived, and you can download it for free at oneshotadventures.com. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, and I'll see you soon.